Well, let's jump in. For me, this is always kind of the first question I like to ask somebody who's running for office. What motivated you to run for office? And again, why do you feel like you're the best person for this position?
Well, what motivated me, first of all, I wasn't really actually thinking about it. Of course, I ran back in 2006 and 2008 and kind of moved on from that. Actually got to the point where I was like, man, I would probably never run again unless maybe the right opportunity came up or whatever. But I just moved on and do a podcast for Americans for Prosperity and just
Yep.
have just done other things and been prosperous in life and have a great family and all of that. So I was set. Um, and Congressman Lamborn told me he was thinking about not running again and was sort of concerned that we might have someone bad who got elected, and asked me if I had any interest in it. And at the time, I did not. Came home, told him I'd talk to my wife and pray about it. I came home, talked to my wife, and we were both like, "This doesn't really seem like a good idea. I don't know why we would want to do this." Um, Prayed about it, thought about it, and had some others kind of approach us about it. And as we were thinking about it, I've been involved in the fight for liberty and freedom for 30 years, and we've made progress and we've lost battles, right, over those 30 years. But I kind of felt like if good people don't go run for office and certainly don't go to Washington, D.C., then everything we fought for will be lost. And so it was kind of like, look, are you going to get in right at the moment when it counts, or do you just kind of fold and say, nah, it's not for me? So, that's kind of what made me step up and step in.
Nice.
Yeah.
So first hard hitting question that way, and I'm with you, man. There are a lot of people in Congress. It's specifically 435 members of the House, right, and 100 people in the U.S. Senate. And sometimes I think you could count on one hand the number of actual good people that are out there. I mean, it has just become that toxic of an environment. So with that, first big hard hitting question: who's a Democrat you most want to meet and you're excited to get to know? And maybe conversely, in addition, is there a Republican out there you're looking forward to getting to know a little bit? Maybe somebody that could be a bit of a mentor for you.
Sure. Well, I mean, look, there is toxicity in Washington and in Congress, and it's grown. Of course, as you know, Mark, I worked out there many years ago. It's a very different place today than it was back then, and it's pretty sad that we've gotten to this point. Surely we can find things to work on together. And it's almost embarrassing that when you say that now in a Republican primary, people will want to jump on you and say, "Oh, see, I told you he's a squish." I mean, look, there's matters of principle and there's matters of judgment, and most things are matters of judgment. Whether you fund a ship or a tank is a matter of judgment. Whether you put utility lines above ground or below ground, those are matters of judgment. Then there's a few things reserved that are matters of principle. So is there a Democrat? I'll just throw out there kind of the Colorado delegation. I look forward to working with members of the Colorado delegation on things that matter to our community. I think if you look at our 2 U.S. senators, they're Democrats. I'm probably not going to agree with them on a lot of things, but I hope I will agree with them on the great things that we need to do for our community, whether it's working on military installations and some of the things that they're doing, or whether it's bringing additional missions to Colorado Springs or economic opportunities to El Paso County. So I would say that, our 2 U.S. senators, Congressman Crow, Congressman Crow serves on the House Armed Services Committee. I look forward to getting appointed, hopefully, to the Armed Services Committee and working with him on some of those military issues. So that's what I'd say. Look, I think there's lots of good members of Congress. My friend Jim Banks, who will be moving on to the U.S. Senate, is a great example. He's been a stalwart conservative, but he's not been crazy. He has a voting record that is stellar, I think. There are other folks like Greg Stubbe from Florida, who is a really good member of Congress that I look forward to working with. The chairman of the Ways and Means Committee, who's actually supporting me in this race, is doing good work. So there's lots of really good members that I look forward to working with.
That's great. So kind of a little bit along those lines, we've talked a little bit about, kind of I don't know if it's necessarily, I mean, the dysfunction is between the parties a lot, but some of it to a certain degree within the Republican Party in some ways. But one of the questions I had, just curious about, within kind of the spectrum of the Republican Party right now, would you say you're closer to Dave Williams and the MAGA group, or more along the lines of a Mike Pence, Mitt Romney? And from my perspective, and why I'm asking this is, I see Romney and Pence as longtime staunch conservatives, but they don't support President Trump. They speak out against him, versus kind of that other spectrum. Where do you see yourself kind of in that mix?
I don't see myself really as either. To be honest with you, Kyle, I think I'm in between. First of all, I support President Trump, and I do because there are two choices in our process here. Either Joe Biden or Donald Trump are going to be the president of the United States, and Joe Biden and his policies have been a disaster for the United States. We see the inflation that we have, the lack of a sane energy policy that is causing problems. I mean, all of these things directly impact the American people. President Trump's policies when he was president were pretty sound. I support renewing the Trump tax cuts, that if we don't do that, we're going to have very serious problems with businesses that don't have the certainty to invest, capital gains issues, things like that. So, all of those things are important. If Joe Biden gets reelected, he's already said he's not going to extend the Trump tax cuts. Those are problems for America if we don't do that. But look, I consider myself to be principled. I despise the fact that it's all about personality at this point. Whether you like the personality of Donald Trump or you like the personality of, Joe Biden, we should be about principle. I'm for limited government, and I'm going to look through that lens of whether something is constitutional or not. The other day I was at an event, and somebody asked me what I thought about housing and what could the federal government do about housing. And I just basically said, look, there's lots of things we can do when it comes to inflation and slowing inflation, which is driving up the cost of housing, and interest rates are going up, making it less affordable. But housing isn't a federal issue. And there are a few people who want to say that, who want to first look at something and frame it as, is this even something that the federal government can or should do according to the Constitution? And so I think we need to do that a little bit more often. I'm going to support President Trump when he's right. I'm going to challenge him when he's wrong. I'm going to do the same thing to the Speaker of the House. The people who will own the voting card when I get elected are the citizens of this district. And I'll talk to them. I'll do my best to represent them. When President Trump, if he is elected, is correct, I will support him. When he's wrong, I will oppose him. And the same thing is true of Joe Biden.
Boy, your lips to God's ears there. It seems to me, Jeff, our country is incredibly divided, right? And either it seems all the time you're either 100% right or you're 100% wrong. And, I haven't been in Congress, but I was in the state legislature for a long time. And I realized that getting stuff done happens a lot of times in the middle. And I kind of like the way, I don't remember exactly how you said it, principles versus, whatever else it was. But I've always thought you can compromise, you can work with the other side and still stand strong in your principles. Doesn't mean you're a tax and spend liberal if you support a continuing resolution, or you work to create a balanced budget, which to my knowledge hasn't happened since George W. Bush's first term in Congress. So how do you when you get there, and obviously it's a freshman legislator, it's hard to do, but how do you, how do you resolve those issues amongst yourself when it comes to, working on the national debt, but at the same time, supporting continuing resolutions, because we have such a big military presence in our community and doing the things that the federal government is supposed to do, while at the same time, maybe limiting the things like housing that it's really not within the purview of the federal government.
Yeah. Well, I think it's a difficult challenge. And as I've thought about this, people think about what they would do once they get elected to Congress. Once you start getting a little closer to an election, it becomes a little more real, and you realize what a difficult challenge it will be. There's going to be some very difficult votes that have to be cast. And you won't agree with me on all of them, Mark, how I do. But I'm always going to try and use freedom and liberty as a guide, use the Constitution as a guide, and do the best I can. But look, there's lots of times where we should be working together for the common good. And the example I'll use is the TikTok bill that just passed Congress. I wouldn't have supported a bill that just banned TikTok, because I just don't like banning platforms for no reason. But a couple of members of Congress, in a bipartisan way, got together, talked about the dangers of TikTok and what's going on. Well, it's not really TikTok, the platform, that's the danger. It's the communist Chinese government behind it. And so they created this TikTok bill. And, basically what it says is the TikTok has a year to divest from communist China. That bill passed I think it was 405 or 417 or something 412 to 5, something like that. A very bipartisan bill that really made a difference for the American people. We ought to do that more where we can and work with folks. Now, let's be honest, there are some people in Congress who don't want to do that. The National Defense Authorization Act just passed in the House Armed Services Committee. And I think the vote was 54-1. The one person was Ro Khanna, who's a Democrat from California. He's there to really decimate defense. So he's not going to be someone that you can probably work with. And so we have to learn how to throw kind of the far extremes off, do the right thing for the American people. And I think you just have to be guided by principle. And, it's something I'm sure every member of Congress struggles with. It's what I will struggle with, because they aren't easy answers sometimes, right?
Yeah, I'm gonna push back just a slight bit there, because I actually think some members of Congress don't struggle with that. And here's why they don't struggle with it: because they just take the easy vote.
Yeah.
Right? Like, whoever it is, the Marjorie Taylor Greens of the world, the AOCs of the world, I don't think they look at actually, what it is they're voting on and making the right decision. It is 100% of the time, what's going to please my constituency, what's going to help me fundraise, what's going to help me get a little bit further down the road. And as well as I do, governing's hard. It is difficult stuff that you have to engage in. And it's the members of Congress that actually engage in the act of governance that, that accomplish stuff. But it seems to me, one of the problems we have is so many people right now that are in that body where it's not about governing. It's about blowing the other side up and increasing your fundraising totals.
Yeah. Or saying something outrageous so you can get on Fox News or MSNBC, or be the king of Twitter, have more followers, those sorts of things.
Going viral.
Yeah. And there are too many...
Can you say something controversial so we can go viral, please?
No, I'm not going to do that, especially 2 weeks before an election, right?
Yeah, help us out here.
Yeah, come on, we're trying to increase listenership.
I just want to be boring today. How's that?
Nice.
No, look, I think that's right. And you see that in the Republican Party, in the Republican conference in the House. We have a razor's thin majority, 2-seat majority. Look, we need to have a 40-seat majority. And then if you have a few members who want to vote and go off the reservation and vote their conscience or whatever, that's good. They can do that. But it's very difficult to do that with the 2-seat majority. I think there's no greater example of kind of what you're talking about than, when they overthrew Kevin McCarthy as speaker with no plan. A handful of people, because they could do it, chose to do it so that they could get on Fox News and send out a bunch of tweets. That is counterproductive. The Democrats never would have done that to Nancy Pelosi ever, and she would have frankly never let them do it. So those are the kinds of things that we have to stop doing. We have a problem in Colorado, and we have a problem in Congress of sort of Republicans attacking other Republicans. They spend much more time attacking each other than they do building a team, as Ronald Reagan did. He built a team. He occasionally worked with Democrats, worked with Tip O'Neill to get some things done, right? Those are important things, and you have to do them based on your principle. You never lay principle aside. But you do want to do good things for the American people. And so, yeah, I think there is a big problem in Congress, particularly in the House right now, of people putting their egos ahead of the country and ahead of the citizens of the United States.
Yeah, Jeff, so you touched on this a little bit. So does the current structure of picking the speaker within the Republican Party or the Republican conference help or hurt Congress's legislative responsibility to the American people? I mean, as you were talking about, a handful of people were able to overthrow McCarthy. What is that doing to the ability to, again, to govern and make decent progress?
Yeah. Well, look, I'm a fan of having a majority in a conference, the majority conference pick their leader and put them up, and then the minority party puts their leader up. I think that's fine. I think what's a bit destructive is this ability for one member of Congress to come up and vacate the chair and things like that. I mean, it's crazy when you have a small majority like that. We aren't the House of Commons here. This isn't the British style. We kicked that to the curb, 250 years ago. We're better than that. We do have to lead. And if we don't, why would the voters continue to give Republicans a majority in the House or a majority in the Senate? What we need to do is be smart. We need to look, folks get upset because they don't get everything. We're $35 trillion in debt. That debt was piled on by Republicans and it was piled on by Democrats. And we need to get out of that debt. We can't continue to pass that on to our children and our grandchildren. So how do we do that? We have to be smart about it. Right now, Republicans have a 2-seat majority in one branch in one house of one branch of government, right? So you can't expect that they're going to get everything that they want out of that. What we need to do is use what we have to build that 2-seat House majority into a 30 or 40-seat House majority, pick up 4 or 5 seats in the Senate this cycle, control that. And then if you also control the executive branch at some point, now you should have control. And now that you have control, you better do something with it and you better make change. But we aren't there yet. And people need to understand that. Conservatives need to understand that. The left is very patient in the change that they make to our country. They do it. They look at it over decades and they're willing to wait decades to get the change that they need. Conservatives seems to want it right now. If they don't get it, they want to throw their leaders out and start anew. That seems kind of like a dumb proposition.
Well, and it's the whole, you better toe the party line. And it's my party line, not your party line or somebody else's party line or a collective's party line, but it's mine, right? You better be exactly 100% with me, because if you're not, you're 100% against me. And if you're 100% against me, you need to go.
Yeah.
And that's been one of the frustrations, I've seen. Shoot, Kyle used to be a Republican. I think it's one of the reasons he's not a Republican anymore, because there just is, there's no room within our party, and I'm talking about the Republican Party, you and I are both Republicans, there's no room in our party with this, for that big tent or for people to have differing values or differing ideas of how to move us forward. And if you can't even, come to some sort of agreement there, then you obviously can't come to any agreement with the Democrats in order to be able to move the country forward. And it is just so frustrating. I mean, Israel ends up not getting funding as quickly as they need. I don't know where you are on the Ukraine issue, but gosh, I sure would like to keep, what's effectively communist Russia in check. But we can't do those things anymore, because if you don't 100% agree with me, you obviously 100% disagree with me.
Well, what's happened is, it's the weaponization of the political parties. I mean, I look at what's happening in Colorado, and I mean, obviously it's my opponent who's doing it. He's the chairman of the Republican Party. He's decided he's not going to resign, or that for some reason there's not an ethical problem to be both a candidate for Congress, control the process, control the money, spend it on yourself, and that's okay somehow. That's just, I mean, mom and dad just taught us better, right? We should all know that that's inappropriate, but they do it to weaponize the process for their own political advantage. And I talked earlier about having principle and being principled. That's not principled. Principle means that you do what's right when nobody's looking, right? Principled means that you get rid of those kinds of conflicts of interest or appearance of a conflict of interest. You just make sure that that isn't something that's there. But what we've seen is people who get control of a process and then weaponize it against their political enemy. We see it in the Biden Justice Department, but frankly, we see it in the Republican Party as well. They are doing the exact same thing, in my mind, that the Biden Justice Department has done, which is weaponize the power that they have to use it to crush their enemies. And that's just wrong. Again, it's not principled, and we have to get back to being principled. If Dave Williams wants to have a PAC that helps him, then he should go form a PAC. He shouldn't hijack the Republican Party and take the resources from it and use it against me or against somebody that he disagrees with. He should do it the legal way, the way that you're supposed to do it, which is go form a PAC. If you want to form a PAC that says, Dave Williams is a great person or whatever, then you can do that. But just go do that instead of hijacking a process that, for 200 years, we've had a party process that kind of remained neutral and those sorts of things. So we see that all the time. It is to try and purify and to weaponize for political advantage, and that's wrong.
Boy, you're speaking my language, but Kyle.
Hey, I want to jump back to the national debt real quick. You were talking about that because, again, this is an interesting issue, obviously, to a lot of people, but in the way I look at it, obviously, like you said, $35 trillion debt. It's a series now of just these continuing resolutions to raise the debt limit to try and keep the government operating. But at the same time, this is a community that's very dependent on defense spending. So again, I had a boss once that used to explain it. It's like a no-win opportunity. How do you balance one with the other? Because in my mind, it's hard to reduce the national debt significantly without cutting defense spending. So how do you balance something like that?
Well, to me, I think we need to re-examine, obviously, the size and scope of the federal government and decide what our founders wanted the federal government to be involved in. I think there's so much, Kyle, that the federal government is involved in that our founders never intended us to do. And there's things that you have to have in government, in a federal government, and there's things that are nice to have. And we need to figure out what the nice to haves are and what the have to haves are. And I think the national defense, our founders were pretty clear. National defense, an interstate commerce, road system, those are have to haves, right? Those are a couple of have to haves. But I would question, and I know people will say, I've had people say, oh, Republicans always say get rid of the Department of Education and all of that. But, we existed as a nation for 200 years without a federal Department of Education. I mean, to say that when I say I want to go eliminate the Department of Education, sometimes people go, well, why would you do that? That's crazy. Why is that crazy? I mean, we did it for 200 years without a Department of Education, but I'll give you some other things. Why do we have an Amtrak subsidy? Why are we subsidizing essentially routes for rich people between New York and Washington, D.C. and Philadelphia and places like that with Amtrak? Why do we have a national endowment for the humanities and things like that? Those things start to crowd out the private sector or charities coming in and doing some of that stuff.
The one that kills me, National Public Radio.
Yes.
I can't for the life of me understand why we have National Public Radio, which is, proven to be, not kind of down the middle. Not down the fairway at all. They have an agenda, and the federal government supports that political agenda.
Yeah. Yeah. And not only that, but look at radio. I mean, the rest of the world, as you know, I was in the radio business for a long time. The rest of the world is moving very quickly to podcasting and to all sorts of things, right? I mean, anybody can get their message out. Why does the federal government have to fund that? I mean, why couldn't National Public Radio go out and be a private entity and not have federal funding? I mean, but we're not going to solve the debt by just saying we're going to get rid of NPR. But we're never going to solve the debt unless we do talk about getting rid of things like NPR, Corporation for Public Broadcasting, all of these things. And then we also have to look at some of the entitlement programs and moving those into a more sustainable system, whether it's Social Security or some of these things. So, I mean, if we're going to have serious discussions about it, we can't just say, oh, that's crazy to talk about getting rid of a federal department. I'll tell you a quick story. When I worked in Congress, we actually introduced a piece of legislation to eliminate the Department of Education. It took, now we're 30 years later, and they're almost have enough votes, almost have a majority signed on to a bill to get rid of the Department of Education. So it takes a long time. Ronald Reagan said the definition of eternal life is a government program. So we understand, right, that it's going to take forever. But when I went down to the Legislative Counsel's office to have them draft a bill to eliminate the Department of Education, I walked in and I talked to the lawyer. I'll never forget his name because it's the greatest lawyer name of all time. His name was Willoughby Shane. Now that's like the greatest lawyer name ever. And I said,
we're not making fun of lawyers here, are we? I mean, come on.
No, just lawyers named Willoughby Shane. But look, I said, look, we want to do a bill to eliminate the federal Department of Education. And this lawyer at the House of Representatives says, you can't do that. That's a federal agency level department. And I said, what do you mean you can't do it? Congress created it. How can you not do it? But that's the kind of institutionalism that you face in Washington. Of course, Congress can eliminate the Department of Education.
Yeah. And, it seems to me the issue there is, the other side, the people who want to keep it, try to set it up as, well, hey, if you get rid of the federal Department of Education, then our kids aren't going to be educated and they're going to be, running around in the streets without shoes on and dirty faces and messed up hair, which just isn't the case, right? I mean, sure, government has a responsibility in education. We've taken that on in this country, but we've done that at the local level because we think local people know better how to educate their kids than a bunch of people sitting in Washington, D.C., right?
That's right. Yeah. Not only that, we've also taken it on by reforms, free market reforms, right? That you worked on, Mark, and others have worked on. Education savings accounts and allowing parents to decide rather than sticking kids in a school because they live in a certain zip code. Those are the reforms that are make a difference in education.
In choice in education. Absolutely. With, charter schools, private schools, whether public schools, whatever it is, choice makes that institution better, obviously.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah. Big fan of that. And, I'm a big fan of that in all things. I mean, I look at veterans healthcare, right? Veterans are trying to be trapped into a VA system by a bunch of bureaucrats who want their job to stay in place at the Veterans Administration. We should have, and President Trump signed the Mission Act several years ago when he was president, that allowed community care to be something that veterans should be able to have. We need to move light speed towards allowing veterans to decide what their care should be, not some bureaucrat somewhere.
Boy, were you at the doctor's office with me a couple of days ago when I was complaining significantly about that? Because man, that's a timely complaint for me, but I'll save that for another day.
Yeah.
I mean, anything else about Congress? Because now we really kind of want to get into and talk about, like where our party goes from here, especially in the state of Colorado. It's a complete disaster, right? I mean, there's no denying it. I started in the state legislature, about 15 years ago now? I mean, it seems like forever ago that I was there. But, we were a purple state at the time. We ended up with majority in the state house. We had 3 out of the 4 statewide elected offices. We had a majority of the members of Congress. At the time, we had 7 congressional seats. We had 4 of them, so we were pretty much a purple state. And now today, 15 short years later, no statewide offices. We're looking at super minorities in both the state house and state senate. And by the way, I think at best, we hold serve in the state senate this year, maybe pick up 1 seat in the state house, but that really doesn't get us anywhere. We have 3 out of the 8 congressional seats in the state of Colorado. And I think it's no secret, the state party is an absolute complete disaster. I mean, we're not focusing on getting more Republicans elected. We're focusing on getting, I could say 2 Republicans elected, maybe. 1 to Congress, 1 as president of the United States, which, obviously that's a good thing. We want to get the presidency back in Republican hands. But it seems to me that we have done nothing but go down the wrong route when it comes to leadership within the Republican Party. And I'll tell you, one of my complaints, I had Doug Lamborn, great guy, decent congressman. But one of my complaints for him was he never took the leadership role within the party that I thought he should have. And that sort of void of leadership, in part, got us to where we are today. How do you see, I mean, literally, you get elected to Congress. I mean, think about it this way. You get elected to Congress, it's you, Lauren Boebert, and somebody new, right? So you instantly become like the most experienced Republican leader in the state of Colorado.
Yeah.
How do you translate that to being the party leader and getting us moving in the right direction? I know that's a huge lift and something that's next to impossible to do, but how do we fix that? How do we start moving the right direction that way? And I hope that you're going to leverage your position in Congress to do that.
Well, no pressure, huh, Mark? Thanks.
I'm sorry, man.
Yeah, no. Listen, no, but you're right. Look, and I don't want to be critical of anyone. Of course, I work for Joel Heffley. I think he cared who the chairman was, but he never actively kind of pushed that. I do think that's the role of a member of Congress, right? The member of Congress from this district needs to be involved in making sure that the party is strong and good. And part of the reason I think we've lost some of these seats, you look at some of the House seats that you're talking about, a couple of Senate seats, particularly even in El Paso County. We don't have a strong grassroots operations. I know people talk about grassroots, but I laugh. The other day, I was at a debate with my opponent, and I talked about, I personally walked over 1,000 doors. Personally, not my campaign. My campaign's walked many, many, many thousands of doors. I walked over 1,000. I don't know if my opponent, who claims to be the grassroots guy, has walked 500 doors. I don't know.
That's the establishment identifying as grassroots, and we need to allow that to happen in today's world, Jeff.
Yeah, you can identify as grassroots. I think that's right. Look, we need to rebuild a party And I intend to do that. When I win this primary, I've made it very clear. I will endorse every Republican candidate for office, whether I supported them in the primary or not. And I will tell you, I did that last cycle. You know, there's a couple state legislators who I didn't support in the primary. I supported their opponent. But once they won, I supported them because that's what you do in a Republican Party. That's how it works, right? Again, you don't use it as a super PAC to wield your own political power to advantage you. It's a political party, and that's how it's supposed to work. So what we need is a Republican Party in Colorado that remains neutral in all primaries, including mine, by the way, right? Remains neutral in all primaries. And then once we have allowed the voters to decide, not the party bosses, not the people who claim to be grassroots but are the establishment, once the votors decide,
It's again, it's not that they claim, it's they identify as. Okay, I just want to make sure we get that, because you can do that now. No, I'm
yeah,
sorry.
that's right. I mean, once the voters decide who the candidates are, then the Republican Party needs to step in and help every one of them, not continue to carry grudges because this person didn't support this person or whatever. I've run for office. I'm a candidate now. There's people who supported me from the very beginning and people who didn't. And you know what? Once I win, how hard is it to be gracious when you win? Like, be gracious, move forward, be a unifier, try and unify a party because you're basing it not on your personality, you're basing it on principle. And if you base it on principle, then it's going to work. And so we have a lot of work to do, both at the local level and at the state level. And look, let's just be honest. What's happened at the state party over the last several months of, you know, really trying to endorse certain candidates and have divisive questionnaires and things like that. And, oh, this guy was grassroots and this person wasn't and all that. It was all designed, masterfully designed, by the way, all designed so that that money that donors sent to the Republican Party could be used by Dave Williams, right? Let's just be honest. I don't know how many mail pieces he sent to help the other endorsed candidates of the party, but I know he's at least sent 3 mail pieces paid for by the Colorado Republican Party to attack his primary opponent, me, and to lie, by the way, about it. That is not what donors were sending money to the political party for. That's not what they were sending it to. And by the way, Donald Trump, I think, paid $40,000 out of his campaign to the Colorado Republican Party for ballot access. So did Nikki Haley. So did Ron DeSantis. So did Vivek Ramaswamy. Where'd all that money go? Because right now it's getting put into Dave Williams' pocket and it's being used for mail pieces to go out and attack other Republicans. That's not what Donald Trump intended that money to be used for.
Yeah. I've only seen pieces supporting Dave.
Yeah.
Like you were saying. That's
Yeah.
That's interesting. Maybe I'm not on the list because I've only seen pieces the other way around. I feel like I see so many pictures of Jeff Crank in my mailbox. I'm beginning to think he lives there.
That's right. You're sick of me. You're as sick of me as I am, right? Yeah. I mean, but look, that's done right? That's an outside group who chooses to do it. They do it the legal way. They don't take money from the party and do that. And that's the problem is you have to do things the right way. And it does matter. Ethics and integrity matter. And I can't imagine what's going to happen if Dave Williams has access to public money, what he might do if this is what he does with party money.
Yeah, I mean, that kind of brings up a good point. When Kyle and I were kind of talking ahead of time about, how we want to approach something like this, there's a kind of bold approach like, what are you going to do when you get there? What, name the 3 pieces of legislation you're going to support. And I've never thought that was like, it's like, oh, geez, you got to be kidding me. That's what you're asking, right? Like, come on. For us, it's so much more about, hey, help us understand who you are as a person. And that's going to tell me how you're going to vote when the specific issue comes up. And I think that sort of proves the point perfectly. If you're the kind of person that's going to misappropriate funds and move them around and do the wrong stuff with them, in one area, then why would you not do the same thing once you get to Congress and you're dealing with taxpayer money?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, trust in a public official, it has to matter. I mean, if it doesn't, then we're going to have a real problem in Congress or in any office, right? If you can't trust the person that you're sending there. And I mean, to me, that's what this whole issue is about. And again, the party should just be used to help all Republicans get elected. It shouldn't be used as a political weapon against, my political enemies. Again, that's what the Biden Justice Department is doing right now, is using their power to attack their political opponents. No different than what the Colorado Republican Party is doing right now.
Which is one of the biggest frustrations I think that I have right now. I talk about this all the time, about how we have again weaponized the criminal justice system. I think in large part Congress, and this is the fault of Republicans right now, using Congress instead of as a legislative body, using it as some sort of investigative branch of the government, which I really just think isn't the responsibility. Right? That's like not what Congress should be doing. And I get that we need to investigate stuff, and I get that we need to shed light on inappropriate things that are happening. But boy, if we had put as much focus on legislating as we have in those areas, maybe the world would be a little bit better place.
Well, look, I mean, I do believe that Congress always has that oversight authority, right? And that is a very important function for Congress to perform, to make sure that money is being spent properly and those sorts of things. And as you know, the subpoena power, Congress has the power to subpoena. It seems like there are some on the left who, people have gone to jail for not following a congressional subpoena, but it's only when it's issued by a by a Nancy Pelosi run House of Representatives. Those are the kinds of things that it ought to be a rule of law. You should comply with a congressional subpoena, whether comes from a Republican chairman or a Democrat chairman, right? They have subpoena power for a reason. That stuff's important. But to your point, I think Congress can do both. I think Congress can provide that oversight that is necessary and needs to be done, but they also need to do their job. And sitting and waiting to the last minute to, and not pass 13 appropriations bills through the year, waiting till the last minute, rolling it all up into an omnibus spending bill and trying to pass it kind of almost at gunpoint, right, to the members of the House or the Senate. That's not doing the people's job and doing their business. And we need to get back to regular order, legislating, passing appropriations bills, making sure that people have the opportunity to go down and offer amendments on open rules. Things like that are important. And we're not doing it right now. We didn't do it under the Democrats and under Nancy Pelosi. We also haven't done it under the Republicans. And we need to fix it.
Yep. Hey, I think we're probably, getting toward the end here. Mark, did you have any other questions?
Yeah, just anything, burning you want to cover that we haven't covered so far? Couple minutes?
Well, I mean, obviously the one thing I would say, immigration, I've talked a lot about that because I hear a lot about that. I mean, I go out and knock doors, and that's almost exclusively what I hear. That and the economy, right, are those two things. And look, we've got to do a better job on immigration. It gets down to the rule of law, Mark. I mean, to you and I and to Kyle, I mean, laws matter. If laws are on the books, you can't just ignore them, because if you don't, you erode the rule of law. And we all know that if we just allow someone to walk by and just break windows and there's no consequence to it, there's more and more windows get broken in a community, right? And if you're kind of a law and order person and you kind of start prosecuting that, and I'm not saying to throw somebody in prison for breaking a window, but you need to do that. There has to be a rule of law. And I think that's what's most problematic of what's happening at the southern border right now. And it's just a broken system, and Congress needs to work on it. But I got to say, the Biden administration has purposefully allowed this to happen. and said, oh, there's nothing we can do about it. Congress has to do something about it. Yet last week, they came in and actually did something about it and said, oh, well, if it gets over 2,500 people who cross a day, then it's a crisis. Well, how about it be zero? How about we not say 2,500 robberies are okay, or 2,500 drug deals are okay a day? Drug dealing's wrong. Robberies are wrong. Crossing the border illegally is wrong. But it seems like the president, if he did it last week, he could have done something 4 years ago too. And
Yeah.
so, it's just pandering. It's in an election year. All of a sudden, for 4 years, he couldn't do anything. Congress had to do something. And then in an election year, all of a sudden, he can do something. And the American people know that that's wrong.
Here's what's encouraging to me on that issue, and we'll let you go. Obviously, the border crisis is an absolute disaster.
Yep.
And I mean a disaster of epic proportions. But whether the President Biden agrees or not that this is something that needs to be solved on, some sort of philosophical level for himself, he now realizes that it's something the American people want. And he realizes that this is an important issue to the American people. And so that's encouraging to me, at least to know that, hey, this border security issue is something in the forefront of people's minds, and it's something that people want solved for our nation.
Yeah.
We weren't there 10 years ago.
Yeah.
We weren't there 5 years ago.
Right. We weren't there 10 years ago. It's a real crisis. I've gone down, visited it twice, and it's a human tragedy. And you see it both on the citizens along the border here in Colorado. It's impacting us in a great way, increasing the cost of, everything from healthcare to auto insurance to, the cost of living. But it's also a tragedy for the people who are coming here. I went to the Catholic Charities facility in McAllen, Texas, when I visited there. And I looked in the eyes of little girls who just traveled 1,000 miles with their mother. And I don't want to know the horrors that they saw coming up through there. And that's happening because our federal government is telling them if they come, we'll let them in. And that is wrong. That is immoral, and it is wrong. And the Biden administration should put a stop to it.
Well, thank you very much, Jeff. Appreciate you coming on and talking to us. And I know we're about, 15 days away from ballots being due. So good luck, wishing you good luck. And, if you win the primary, maybe we'll be able to have you back on as we get closer to November and talk some more, but I've really appreciated you talking to us today.
You bet, Kyle. I've never been accused of not talking or talking too little. So I've never been accused of that. So I'd love to come back. Always happy to talk with you. And look, we've got a community and a country to keep vibrant and to save, and we got to work together to do that. And I look forward to working with you guys. And I'd ask for people's vote. I mean, I'll just simply say it. I need your vote in this primary. It's a very important election. I think it's important to the future of our community and the future of our country. And if people want to know more, they can go to jeffcrankforcongress.com and get those ballots in. June 25th is the deadline.
All right. Your last chance. You won't say something super controversial for us just to promote our ratings, because that's what we're really about here.
Zipping it, buddy.
Thanks. Appreciate the time, man.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Jeff. Take care.
Thank you. Take care.